Hi guys, Coffee here and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I finally got my hands on the X100VI. Its predecessor, the X100V or X100V, was one of the most popular and iconic cameras of the last few years. And on release, this X100VI, to be honest, was no different. Basically, the day it was released, there were already wait lists spanning multiple months. And I personally am on 2 different wait lists and I still don't have my own camera yet. And we're going to touch on that a little bit later on. But for now, let's dive into what the main differences are between this camera and its predecessor. So the main difference then between the X100V and the X100VI is on the inside. We now have the same sensor out of the X-T5, which is 40 megapixels, up from the previous 26, so you get a decent resolution gain there. The downside to that is the fact that the low light capabilities are marginally worse. It's very slight, but I've seen this previously. But the thing I was probably most excited about is the fact that these cameras now have IBIS. I've wanted IBIS for a long time and this camera delivers. When it comes to the actual design of the cameras, well, they look identical other than this single switch. It's changed, it's no longer red, and that is literally it. And if you're wondering where this camera comes in price-wise, in the UK it's £1,700, which actually makes it more expensive than the X-T5 now. The X-T5 is discounted just about everywhere and you can pick it up brand new for £1,500. So there's a £200 price difference there. I know the X100 comes with a lens, but with £200 you could pick up the 23mm f2 used and end up with a camera that is in many ways better, but in many ways it's just a completely different camera. But definitely a consideration if you're going into the market looking at new cameras. But that's enough about talking about them. Let's actually go out and test them. We took the camera out to Mudderford. It's the beach closest to me. I've got lots of like nostalgic feels from there. It's where I used to go a lot as a child. Absolutely love it down there, and the sun was shining. So first impressions then. I think the thing that stands out, because we were using both the X100V and the X100VI at the same time, was the fact that when I pulled them out of my bag and went to give Claire one of them, the only way I could really tell them apart was to read the model number on the top. Now there is a slight weight difference. You can feel it when you're holding both cameras at the same time. If you were to hold them like apart from each other, do you know what? It is reasonably subtle. There is a slight difference. And the X100VI, it does rattle a little bit due to that IBIS on the inside. Now I do think this makes the X100VI, coming at it from the perspective of an X100V user, feel a little bit underwhelming. I think what they should have done is just make some very subtle design changes so that you could tell the two cameras apart easily, especially when you were holding them. I think if they had done that, it would have just made the camera feel visually different and therefore mentally different when you were using it. Companies like Apple are exceptionally good at doing this. They basically sell you the exact same phone every 12 months, but every 12 months there's enough of a design change that you know when you're holding the new phone that it is the new one. They might move a button, they might offer you a new color, and I think Fuji would have really benefited from that. I just think having it feel exactly the same makes it feel less new. Next up then, let's talk resolution. We've now got 40 megapixels instead of 26, so you can definitely crop a little bit further. I think the only thing that from the kind of few days that I had it that I observed was it didn't feel like you could crop as much as you could with the X-T5. And the only thing that makes sense here is that maybe with the X-T5, where I was using the new f1.4 lenses, they're sharp, they're probably made for this extra resolution, so you could really maximize the croppability. With the X100, we've still got the same lens as before, and as much as you can crop, I felt like I could feel a difference, that it wasn't quite as good and the images weren't quite as sharp cropped in as I had experienced previously. I really do like having these extra megapixels in a camera like this, especially when you've got a fixed focal length. It's one of my favorite things about the Leica Q3. The fact that it's a 28mm lens but a 60 megapixel sensor means you get really usable crops at 35 and 50. Now the downside with the X100 is being a 23mm lens, which is a 35mm equivalent. You can't really go wider, you can only go longer. Now the good thing is a 50mm image is still 20 megapixels, which is more than enough for most uses. And one of the good things about not having any design changes means that the older accessories still work. So for people like me that absolutely love 28mm, I can still use my wide angle converter. So next up then, let's talk IBIS. This was the bit I was most excited about. I do think when it comes to IBIS, it really depends on your situation. Now for me, shooting at the beach, we had a really bright sunny day, which meant I was already shooting high shutter speeds, which meant I really didn't need IBIS. Though Throughout the kind of like week that I used the camera, I didn't really need it, but it's in situations where you need IBIS or you want IBIS where you begin to miss it. And the good thing about having IBIS and being able to shoot this camera at slower shutter speeds handheld is the fact that you can kind of outweigh that slightly worse low light performance with being able to use a slightly slower shutter speed, assuming that whatever it is you're shooting doesn't kind of get affected by a slow shutter speed. Like, you obviously can't really use IBIS on a fast moving subject and a slow shutter speed because you're not going to get that same effect. In terms of actually being able to handhold the camera, I did do some tests, but I don't know the answer yet to what the slowest speed I could handhold it was compared to the previous camera, so I'll stick them up on the screen now. Just in use, I could definitely tell that I could handhold slow the X100VI. You guys will now know the difference in terms of how well it works. And another really big win of IBIS is when it comes to video. If you've ever tried to shoot video on a camera that doesn't have IBIS, like the X100V, you'll find that if you try and handhold the video, you get all these like micro jitters that really annoy me to the point that I find the video basically unusable. But that same scene with the X100VI and that IBIS working away kind of levels it out completely and gives you some really usable footage. And that sunset that I had that evening was absolutely incredible, and I love how the video came out. I haven't graded that, that is straight out of camera using, I think it was the Provia video settings. Something that a lot of people I think are going to be interested in is the autofocus. Now here on my channel, I don't really have any extreme autofocus needs. I'm not shooting moving subjects all that often, and when I am, I can normally make do. I've never really had problems when it came to autofocus with the X100V. Now when it does come to the X100VI, based on my experience of just 1 week, it felt like when using things like autofocus, the camera was a little bit cleverer, it was quicker to spot eyes, I think it tracked them a little bit better as well for some of the portraits, and you do have the new settings in there, things like cat, is it animal, cat, bird, train, whatever they are, they're in there as well, so it's nice to have them. I imagine the limitation at this point is probably the mechanical side of things. We've got the same lens with the same sort of audible focusing motor, and it's probably that now that needs to improve for us to see a real step gain when it comes to autofocus. But for me, it seemed a little bit better, but I haven't really drawn any hard conclusions, as it's very hard to in just the space of a week. If you're wondering what the codes mean down at the bottom of my images, that links to my stackable preset collection. As an example, if you take this image, apply a basic adjustment 2, then tone curve 1, you end up with this final image. There's more info down in the description if you want to find out more. Now, I'm not sure if it's come across like I don't really like the X100VI, because that's definitely not the case. I just think from the perspective of being an X100V owner, you really need to want 40 megapixels or want IBIS, and for IBIS maybe use video, for it to make much sense. Now for me personally, I told you at the start of this video that I'm on 2 different wait lists, and my experience with this camera has actually got me to cancel both of them, which it's got nothing really to do with the X100VI, it's probably a little bit more to do with just how good the X100V was, and the upgrades for me just don't make it worthwhile. However, if you don't have the X100V and you have an older model, then I imagine the upgrade will feel pretty substantial. And then the other thing that's happened, which is really good, is the fact that having this new camera come out, even though the wait lists for it are pretty long at the minute, means that the used market has crashed. Finally, it's crashed. Here in the UK, you can now pick up X100Vs for £1,000 and less. And I think at £1,000 versus £1,700, that is a massive price difference. And for me personally, again, it's just not really worth that £700 upgrade cost. But it does mean if you're in the market or was looking for an X100V previously, it is now in the realms of a normal price. So maybe that is the other consideration here. And I guess importantly, the X100VI has all of the things that made the X100V as good as it was. It's just that the upgrade for me, it feels a little bit more like an X100 5.5 than an X100VI. It feels like an iteration rather than a full upgrade. Now I know that's my conclusion, and many of you will have different conclusions, and if you're somebody who shoots the X100V like every single day, then I can see why I'd want to upgrade the thing that you use constantly. If you've enjoyed this video though guys, please do not forget to like and subscribe. There is plenty more Fujifilm, Leica and travel content coming to the channel very, very soon. Thank you for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.